Today we're taking a look at a woman gang leader, Kate Barker, more infamously known as Ma Barker or Arizona Barker. Not because she was from Arizona, she was actually born in Missouri, but because her birth name was Arizona Donnie Clark. She was married to George Barker. They had four sons together: Herman, Lloyd, Arthur, and Fred. She was the criminal matriarch of the Barker Carpus Gang, better known as the Barker Gang or Ma Barker and her boys. She could not have picked a better era to be a gang leader. It was public enemy time in the United States. Criminals held a grip over the public and the press. Think Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. Yeah, regular celebrities in really hard times. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, would call her the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade. That made for an exceptional headline, that did. Was it true? Probably mostly no, a little yes, as these things go. In film, news reports, songs, poetry, and books, she was certainly painted as a ruthless mastermind. However, many who knew her personally would say she had no role in her son's crimes. The FBI painted her as a gangster to justify killing her. What? Would the government do such a thing? Well, yes, they would. They've done it before, and they'll do it again. So just remember to take what is written about Ma Barker with a grain of salt, because much of it is very probably myth. Ma's hubby, George, worked a string of low-pay jobs. But at least he had them during the First World War and the Great Depression, when many had no work at all. He had work, and that says a lot. But the FBI would paint him as a shiftless and illiterate man who was neglectful of his sons. They would say all the Barkers were illiterate, in fact, and that was probably correct and not unusual for the time. Herman, the eldest son, was only 17 when he began his criminal life. He was arrested then for highway robbery. While escaping in a getaway car, he ran over a child. He would get his younger brothers involved in criminal life as well, and the four would even get involved in their most serious crimes with another infamous gang at the time, the Central Park Gang. Herman's life ended pretty young, at just around 34 in Wichita, Kansas. Sidebar, how fun is Wichita to say? So, Herman does a robbery in Wichita on August the 29th, 1927. There's a confrontation with police that plays out dramatically in the press. Herman shot a policeman point blank range in the face. He then opted out of life after he crashed his car trying to get away and suffering serious injuries. Just a year later, the second eldest son, Lloyd, was sent off to Leavenworth Prison, while Arthur, also known as Doc Barker, was at Oklahoma State Prison, and the youngest son, Fred, was in the Kansas State Prison. At some point that year, George likely left his family, or probably he was kicked out. It's not clear. He did, however, claim their assets after each in turn died. With her sons in prison, no husband, and no way to support herself, Ma Barker took up with other men, living with an Arthur Dunlop until 1930. Then Fred was released, and he hooked up with a fellow prisoner, Alvin Carpus. Together, they formed the Barker Carpus Gang, which committed a series of robberies. In December 1931, they killed a local sheriff in West Plains, Missouri, and fled the territory with Dunlop and Ma Barker in tow. A wanted poster went up for the four, offering $100, which was a big deal in the day. Arthur would be released next, and he joined the gang along with a few other criminals. They all moved to Chicago initially, which was a hitting spot for gangsters back in those days, including Al Capone. Carpus was left behind because he did not want to work with Capone. They would not stay in Chicago long, though. St. Paul, Minnesota was a better place for criminals who had wanted wanted posters all over the place for them. It's likely that their racketeering friends wanted less heat on them as well. This is where the Barker Karpis gang committed their most infamous crimes, with the protection and friendship and corrupt cover of St. Paul's police chief. When members of the public would tip off police that the folks from the wanted posters were in this house or that one, well, the chief would just very helpfully let the gang know in time for them to escape. However, the gang thought that at least one of these reports came from Dunlop, and that Dunlop was revealing their location, and so they killed him. He was found naked and quite dead outside of Webster, Wisconsin. The chief would be found out as well sometime later and was demoted first and then kicked out of the police force. The gang would move from St. Paul to Menominee, I hope I'm saying that right, Wisconsin, where they hid Ma up in hideouts and hotels to first keep her away from the crimes, but also to keep her away from their women. Ma did not like the girlfriends. Not at all. Eventually, they went back to St. Paul, where they kidnapped wealthy businessmen. William Ham's kidnapping resulted in a $100,000 ransom, and Edward Bremer's kidnapping got them $200,000. You can imagine that that was excessive amounts of money at the time. Latent fingerprint analysis was a new tool at the time, and the FBI would use it to connect the gang to the kidnappings. The gang, knowing the FBI was looking to capture them, headed back to Chicago with their dirty earnings. 1935 arrives, and Arthur was arrested in Chicago. He had a map with him that told FBI agents that the rest of the gang could be found in Ocklawaha, these names, Florida, far from the cold, windy winter of Chicago. After all that traveling and kidnapping and robbing and the like, they probably did need a vacation. The FBI were able to pinpoint the house the gang was using a few clues, including references and letters to a local alligator. No, not kidding there. Gator Joe helped the FBI locate the Barker boys. By the time they got there, though, on January 16th, 1935, preparing to arrest the entire gang, it was only Ma Barker and son Fred left in the house. Agents ordered the pair to surrender, but Fred was not having any of that. He opened fire on officers instead, so there was a shootout. Fred and his mother had spent their last day on Earth. The gunfight was a long one. Legend has it that locals came out to watch, and some even had picnics during the show. Picnics at a shootout. When the gunfire finally stopped, the brave agents ordered a handyman into the house to see what was going on in there. Yep, Willie Woodbury, not an FBI agent, went into the house to report that there was no one left alive inside. Both Ma and Fred were found in the front bedroom. According to the FBI, Ma had a Tommy gun in her hands, but others say that there was one in the room, between where Ma had fallen and where Fred had fallen. Given the intensity of the shootout, it's likely only Fred participated, and we can tell that now from the number of gunshot wounds that Ma Barker and Fred received. Ma received one and died. J. Edgar Hoover was a man who liked telling his stories, and his stories would justify killing an elderly woman who was most likely not a criminal mastermind, but an over-the-top, overly devoted mother who condoned the behavior of her sons. Without a trial of the evidence, or any evidence at all really, it's impossible to say that Ma Barker was really a gang leader, but she was very clearly an accomplice. She was helping. They were eventually buried some 10 months later at Welch, Oklahoma, near eldest son Herman. Karpis would later say that the most ridiculous story in the annals of crime is that Ma Barker was the mastermind behind the Carpus Barker gang. She wasn't a leader of criminals or even a criminal herself. She was more of a mask to make the traveling gang look like they were simply a mother and her sons, an innocent family. Another infamous bank robber, Harvey Bailey, who knew the gang and knew Ma Barker, would agree. The legend is far more interesting, though, and will probably continue to be the story told through history with very, very little truth to it. Until next Thursday. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.